This isn't just from right now. What's been happening in the last 5 years with this to create this situation?
For the last 5 years, inequality has been on a rise for 18 consecutive quarters. And second, extreme poverty has been rose 67% since 2014, a big rise, and this is very much due to some disadjustment in the Bolsa Família, this large safety net. But in both ways, first the size of the benefit has not kept up with inflation, and the number of beneficiaries fell. So Brazil didn't use a very good instrument to fight poverty in the middle of a very great recession, and this made us go backwards in terms of social and extreme poverty indicators.
One of the main problems then is that it's remained fixed. It hasn't been adjusted with inflation then. And
Yeah, so you're losing ground.
So you're losing value every time.
And you are taking, it's something that's happening in 2019, you took 1 million people out. So you have a line which was non-existent, and now you have 500,000 people on the line that should be receiving Bolsa Família and are not receiving. But the point is that this is a very serious problem, but gets worse given what happened in the last 5 years. So it's a bad news after many bad news.
How important is Bolsa Família for the poor in Brazil?
They are very important, and at the same time, reaches about 1/4 of the Brazilian population. The very, very poor is very well targeted. The money goes to women, goes to children with conditionalities, and costs very little. So it costs only 0.4% of the GDP. So basically Brazil did a sort of fiscal adjustment on the poor. So didn't solve anything on the fiscal side, and made the poverty rise, and made the economy very sluggish in terms of recovery, because the poor consume more of the money they get. So it was a bad choice, but in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I want to go into that. That was something that you mentioned in the article as well, so thanks for that. Like, this is relatively cheap for Brazil, Bolsa Família. Why not attack, but why cut this, since it doesn't cost much and it seems to have a big impact?
It's a review preference. Maybe Brazil is not caring very much about the very poor for some reason. It speaks by itself.
One thing that you touched on earlier that I want to talk about a little bit more, this could be not just a problem for the very poorest in Brazil, no? This could affect the whole economy from what you were saying. How so? Can you explain that for us?
We calculate the multipliers, how much each real spent affects the GDP. So in the case of Bolsa Família, 1 real spent impacts 3 times more the GDP each real than, for example, social security benefits, because the Bolsa Família goes to the very poor, or any other type of transfer. So it's the one that generates the multiplier. Why? Because the poor basically consume their income. So it goes back to the economy, to the local economy, so makes the wheels of the economy go around.
So the government's sort of like pulling the rug out from under the economy by doing this?
That's right, and then the worst indicator Brazil had in this last is extreme poverty. That was the best picture we had in the 15 years before, and the 20 years before, in terms of the Millennium Development Goals, etc. So Brazil, to recover, if Brazil grows 2.5% a year, every year, until 2030, extreme poverty, if inequality doesn't change, we will go back to 2014. If we do grow 2.5%, which we are not.
Yeah.
So even a very bright macro scenario, if we don't correct what is happening in the Bolsa Família type of disadjustment, we will, 15 years we will be where we were before.
Wow.
So it's really, but it's easy to solve, because not a lot of money, so it's something that I'm not negative. I think that it's something that it's just a nonsense that should be corrected anytime, I hope.
Is there a possibility that the government might just stick a new name on it and keep the program but put their own, rebrand it, as you were saying?
No, I think this is almost sure.
Right.
But I think there will be some changes and hopefully positive changes.